through. So we want to make sure that it looks like it's a really robust showing for her. She will never know that the periphery is empty. But that's really up to you. Oh, she can hear? Oh, Amanda, the room is packed. There is thousands of people here. Just want to recap a little bit about what we heard yesterday. We heard some of our local and state officials. Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll visited and gave us some insights to the administration's goals, policies, and some of the objectives for the SEC, the Seaport Economic Council. Very glad to say that we heard from our partners and supporters at Cape Cod Chamber Blue Economy Foundation. I thought I saw Katie here earlier. Yes. Where is Katie? Hi, Katie. Thanks for coming back. We also presented an Anchor Institution Award to our friends and partners at Cape Cod Community College. Thank you, Dr. Cox, and thank you, Cape Cod Community, for being our Anchor Institution. And then, of course, for those of you who were able to join last night, we got a delicious sample of how to make ugly fish. America's celebrity chef Stephen Coe prepared for us things like monkfish, which I wouldn't kiss, but I will definitely eat, razor clams and things of the nature. Thank you to Stephen Coe and, of course, Cork and Table for sponsoring that event, and our guest sponsors, Northeastern Bank. Today, we are going to have a very tech-heavy day. We're going to start off a little bit with tech. I'm going to tell you that if Amanda's listening, I think I already told her this before, in economic development, we don't like to reinvent the wheel. You're going to hear from her about their smart sound concept, and with your help and support, if you think it's a good idea too, we're going to steal this idea, and I think that we can really activate our harbor. All about stealing ideas. Yes, yep. It just makes its way down the Cape. Also, this afternoon, we're going to have a live tech demonstration. Looks like the weather turned in our favor. For those of you who drove in from the south, you probably saw a lovely rainbow greeting you as you came into Plymouth. I've heard a lot of stereotypes about the Irish, but that they travel with rainbows is one I hadn't heard before. At about 11 o'clock, we're going to hear from our Irish delegation. We have the Cathaoirleach of Donegal County, Martin Harley. We have the Economic Development Director of Donegal, Gary Martin. And we also have a very special guest, Declan Gallagher, who is a serial entrepreneur focused largely on things like kelp. One of his latest products is a fertilizer product that uses kelp and introduces fewer nitrates into the soil, which is very important, especially for our area, given the fact that Plymouth alone has, 7 golf courses? And that doesn't even talk. Katie, how many do they have on the Cape? Dozens. Exactly. So this, to say nothing, of course, of the septic issue that the Cape and the Plymouth area is working on. So I just want to say that visit the Cape Cod Community College Toilet of the Future. We learned a little bit about that yesterday too. It's a technology that hasn't been changed for 200 years, except on Cape Cod Community College campus. Michelle is going to give us a rundown of our sponsors and what to expect for the rest of the day. Thank you, everyone. Nope, no claps.
Claps. You can clap for me. I'll always take an applause. Hi there, Michelle Pecoraro. I want to thank the many sponsors that we have. First of all, this breakfast is being sponsored by Holtec International. Thank you very much. Patrick's right over there. Thank you. And our sponsors, Cape Cod Community College, which is a legacy sponsor from last year. Holtec, as I mentioned. Green CIQ, which is a legacy sponsor from last year. And be sure to continue with the conference over to Green Sea's offices in Cordage Park, where we will have tech demos and they will have a reception to end the conference and to show their new digs, and also to talk about their new branding. We have Northeastern Savings Bank, who sponsored the Ugly Fish Nosh and Networking last night. We had a great time. Massasoit Community College, who sponsored the student session yesterday. Tiny and Sons Glass, who is a legacy sponsor and sponsors all of your snack breaks. They got a big round of applause yesterday for that. People love food. And then for the breakouts, we have sponsors New England Aquarium, who sponsored the climate resilience session yesterday. The aquaculture session yesterday was sponsored by Cape Cod 5, who is a legacy sponsor as well. Workforce Development today is sponsored by Vineyard Wind. We're happy to have them on as a new sponsor this year. The Marine Technology session, breakout session, is sponsored by Promare Inc., and they were again with us last year as well. Policy Roundtable yesterday was sponsored by the Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod, another legacy sponsor. And the Conference Tech, all of this wonderful stuff that you see and the gents back there, is sponsored by the Plymouth Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much. And so, a couple of things. Be sure to visit the resource tables out front during your breaks. A special thanks to all of our wonderful volunteers who you've encountered, I'm sure, many times. The Plymouth Navigators, under the leadership of Isabella Rose, and hosted by the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. We have a merchandise table out front that will be closing at 12:30 today. So if you want merch, you need to go get it. You know, our mascot Thoreau is all over our merch, which is a lot of fun. So please go look at what we have. We thank the many partners who have been with us, the speakers, the organizations they come from, the folks that are vending or have resource tables out front. Thank you to all of them. You can find their logos on plymouth-mass.biz, where you went to register for the conference. And Plymouth's electric passenger vehicles will be available to take folks to the lunch and tech demo at Green Sea. They will probably be out back here or out front. We don't know which. I'll let you know. But you can see through. So those EVs will take you over if you don't want to drive your car over and you just want to stay parked in your free parking space over here. There is also free parking over at Cordage Park, so drive on over or take the EVs. And Green Sea, as I said, is our sponsor for the lunch today over at their offices and the tech demos. The lanyards and name tags that you have, if you could drop them in the basket on your way out to the tech demos, that would be awesome. And that's all we have for you for housekeeping notes today. Thank you. And so without further ado, I want to introduce my friend and our illustrious Mayflower autonomous ship, Brett Phaneuf, who will introduce our speaker because he actually knows her very well because they both live in Plymouth, England.
So that's several pieces of news to me. Apparently we're friends. That's good to know. I'll take you off the list. And then, and as Michelle rightly pointed out, since I live in Plymouth, England, with Amanda, we all know each other in Plymouth. They have a group gathering once a week. We all have to shake hands. It's lovely. So I do know Amanda. She's fantastic. I've known her for about 15, 20 years now since we started working in Plymouth. She is responsible for the economic development of the city. And in the last 10 years of her tenure with Plymouth City Council, she's brought in almost $200 million of investment and has refocused the city's economy around marine engineering and high-tech jobs. And she's certainly been instrumental in helping us grow and keeping my companies working in Plymouth and expanding. And she's done that for a lot of different companies. And so she's very passionate about Plymouth to Plymouth links. So I think that there's a lot that they do in Plymouth and that we do in this Plymouth, that together we'd be greater than the sum of our parts if we could really get a collaborative set of programs going around marine tech. As I said, 10 years at Plymouth City Council, before that in industry at Serco, and then a decade before that in industry, where she's always been very successful. She's got degrees in town and county planning and economic development, and I'm happy to introduce my friend, a real friend, Michelle, Amanda Razzi from England. Please give her a warm welcome.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Brilliant, thank you. So thank you very much, Brett, for your very kind introduction. quite hard to follow that because it's quite a high bar to sort of the pitch for. I've got some pictures here to show you, just to give you a bit of an idea and a bit more sort of background. So I don't know the pictures. Can you see the picture? You should have a picture in front of you of Plymouth. And this is a picture of Plymouth actually taken from the sea, looking in towards the lands. And the reason I've particularly chosen this picture is that it says quite a lot about how the city has behaved in the last, well, actually since post-war. It's been very inward looking and not outward looking. And bearing in mind it was a city that was very outward looking and has been the start place of many illustrious journeys from Darwin through to the Mayflower. It's been quite a shame that it's been inward looking. Plymouth has got a population of 260,000, so we don't all get together, all 260,000 once a week and shake hands. But I do get to see Brett quite often. But it's not a very 260,000 isn't that big a population, and it isn't actually that well connected. It's connected very well by the sea, but it's not that well connected when you look at things like its land connections. It doesn't have an airport, for example. And the other thing about the city is it has a very a very tight labour market. We don't have an issue in terms of jobs. In fact, there's currently about 2,000 vacancies in the city, and that is people that are looking to attract people, but they can't fill those jobs. So that's quite an important thing in terms of its background, because it's something that I will talk about as I go through this presentation, about how we changed our approach from looking inwards in terms of looking in towards the land and move back towards looking outwards and looking towards the sea and what that brings. So if you could just move to the next slide, please. So one of the things about Plymouth, that maybe you don't know, is that it's the largest naval base in Western Europe, and it's the home of the nuclear deterrent in the UK. This is where our nuclear submarines are base ported out of. And as it's the largest naval base in Western Europe, it's 350 acres, 7 miles long. It's huge. It's a garrison town, and that's really important in terms of that, how the economy operates. With it brings a forward order book in terms of where we know that there will always be jobs. There will always be jobs around the naval base. But the nature of those jobs are changing, and how we adapt and change will drive our future productivity and prosperity. So there is something to be said about going back to the issue about jobs. We don't need more jobs. What we actually need are better paid jobs. So we are deliberately taking the stance of not focusing on tourism for the sake of tourism jobs. And I will cover this a little bit further on. We're focusing on tourism about how we reposition the brand of Plymouth to attract people to want to live and invest in Plymouth. So if we just move on to the next slide. And this is why we've really been looking at the technology angle, and particularly around marine autonomy. So we've been doing quite a lot of work around mapping where our true global competitive advantage sits, and it's around marine autonomy. And a lot of that, to be fair, has been driven by Brett and Brett's drive, energy and enthusiasm. But there is a global cluster within Plymouth around marine autonomy, and that's not just the business base, it is the research base as well. So there are a couple of academic institutions: Plymouth Marine Laboratories, Marine Biological Association, Plymouth University, and then you lay on top of that the business base. Within that, you've got MSubs, ProMari, Marine AI, which are businesses which are within Brett's sphere. But then you have other businesses like Thales and Frugro, which also have a marine autonomy element. Now, that isn't just us as a city picking that up. There was a piece of work which was done by our national government looking at global competitive advantage, and our Department of International Trade has recognised marine autonomy as a high value opportunity for the city, but also for the country. But this has been driven by a whole series of things, and I'm going to just sort of touch on this around the concept of the smart sound. So the smart sound is an area that it's a brand, it's a name that we have put on something, but it is literally just it's a place where we encourage and are open to technologies being tested. So it's the opportunity to test things within the sound and put in place some of the building blocks to make that possible. Now, in my very simple head, the best way of thinking about this is if you go skiing, you're given a piste map, and on that piste map, it tells you where the lifts are, it tells you where the restaurants are, it tells you where you can how you can navigate the mountain. And actually, the smart sound isn't much more than a piste map in terms of telling you how you can, as a business, you can navigate to test within the sound. And in the same way with a piste map, you need to make sure that you've got product there. Some of the product that we have developed has includes things like a subsea 5G network, so you can test vehicles and applications for subsea 5G applications. That is something we're developing at the moment. We did develop a product which was a 5G connection above the sound. I can talk about some things that worked and didn't work with that. I'll cover that later on. But technology has overtaken us in that sphere. We've looked at some of the areas around regulation, and I think probably the US is further ahead than where we are in the UK with regulation. But at the moment, we're working with our regulatory body, which is the Marine and Coast Guard Agency, to look at how we can simplify the regulation. Pretty hard, I would say that. And then the other thing that we've been looking at in terms of how we pull wider economic development together, and I'm just going to sort of move on to sort of another area, but I will come back to the smart sound, is looking at the skills. Because one of the things that we've sort of looked at, and going back to we don't need more jobs, what we need better paid jobs. So if you could just move on to the next slide. In terms of helping kids being able to access some of those jobs, you need to have a long-term view. And Brett touched on earlier, we've been looking at this over 10 years, but we are looking at that sort of 10 to 15 year cycle. And it's the primary school children that will be the future engineers. And one of the things that I particularly picked out this photograph, probably because it made me laugh more than anything else. You've got two kids wearing helmets. And I was thinking, why have they got helmets on? But when you look at the child that's close, he looks like he's about to hit the other child with that oar. So it does reference the need for a helmet. But how do you get kids interested in marine engineering? We don't need more jobs. We actually need more engineers. We need more people working in STEM. We need to make it attractive. We need to make it cool. We need to make kids want to go in to engineering. And that needs to start right from quite a young age. And I did a little bit of analysis looking at the wage rates and going back to, we don't need more jobs, we need better paid jobs. Jobs that work in the sort of marine engineering sphere and defence, the average salary is around £33,000. If you were looking at the average salary within Plymouth, it's around £25,000. If you look at defence-based businesses, the average salary is around £50,000. Now, I know that's in pounds, but that gives you an indication of these are better paid jobs. Marine engineering, defence-based marine engineering, high-tech marine engineering, that is where the better paid jobs are. And that is where, and in order for us to make Plymouth a wealthier place, we need to make sure that the people that live there can access those jobs. And we need to think of a long-term plan on that. And that's about how you make kids find engineering cool. And that's part of the reason I've also got this picture up, is this is one of those activities that it was about getting kids on the water and looking at engineering, about making it seem like a cool thing to go and work in. So we just moved down to the next slide, which is a little bit about how we've looked to attract people into Plymouth. So one of the other things that we have sitting alongside the Smart Sound, which is innovation based, is we've been looking at how you attract people to live and work in Plymouth. And one of those products that we've got is something called the National Marine Park, and that is around helping to change the image of Plymouth away from a garrison town, recognizing the beauty of the sound, and encouraging people to get in, on, and under the water. But the important thing about that is, how do you attract high-value engineers to come and want to relocate to Plymouth? And part of that is about quality of life, live, work Plymouth, but it's also being able to have those high-quality jobs. So this is just like another thing that we've done in terms of using the sound in that wider context. We'll just move on to the next slide, please. So Brett, this is the Mayflower autonomous ship. This picture wasn't taken in Plymouth, but it was a good picture showing the the Mayflower with its full sort of livery. Now, I wanted to mention this because this was a project that was developed in Plymouth. It was tested in the Smart Sound. It is highly innovative. It is something that we are very proud of. I didn't know Brett was going to be there today. So I assume he's covered this in a lot more detail. But this is something that, as a city, we are exceptionally proud of, and exceptionally proud of Brett and his contribution that he has made towards innovation. But that was tested in Plymouth, and actually the first picture that that was put into this presentation, it wasn't in its full livery. It was being towed. It was on like a leash as it was being taken around Plymouth Sound. All the technology was working autonomously, but we weren't allowed to let it off a leash. And it was sort of chugging around the sound on a leash on the back of a boat. But this ability to have a space where you can test technology, and one of the things that Plymouth has got in terms of the sound, which when I will come on to some of the later pictures, you will be able to see it. It has got a breakwater, which means you have the ability to have flat water and then very, very rough water. And it gives you another element to be able to test facilities in. We then will go on to the next slide. We've got some more images of some of the autonomous systems and things that we're using and being tested in the Smart Sound. This is more bits of kit. I believe this is some stuff that's come from the university and some of their facilities. And again, this is how research is using the Smart Sound. They're using it as the capability to attract businesses to come down and test and prototype activity. And again, going back to the branding, it is actually more or less just a piece map, but the important thing, it's a piece map that people are all buying into. So if we just go down to my next slide, which I just wanted to cover off, this is how we've sort of changed the outlook on Plymouth. It's much, instead of looking inwards, we've moved it to looking outwards. And all our economic focus has been much more around looking outwards, particularly towards the sea. And it's been quite a shift for the councils. It hasn't happened easily. There is still quite a lot of energy and effort around, let's say, the tourism sector. But the tourism sector doesn't pay well. So the average job in tourism is £18,000. So shifting to being focused on the sea, shifting to being focused towards marine autonomy, shifting towards being innovation-based, shifting towards, I'll be honest, I don't think it's understanding where a municipal organisation such as the council needs to correct a market failure, or where we actually just get in the way of academic institutions and business, big and small, where we add value, and understanding where we need to help and support and where we're not supported at all. So I think one of the things that I think that is the biggest challenge for our business community at the moment is around that, attracting people to live and work in Plymouth, to attract people to want to relocate to Plymouth, to make sure that the image of the city is such that people would want to come and relocate there, and then making sure that the concept of the smart sound is as easy to navigate as possible, and that we don't get in the way, that we allow we help and support the deregulation, we help and support and advocate for simplicity for businesses to come and access. We help and advocate for where there is a market failure, where things are too expensive for businesses to come in and access, and where there are examples of where the technology needs some additional investment to help, then we help with that. But there are examples, and I touched on it earlier, of where we have intervened and it hasn't worked. And it hasn't worked because the technology has moved on by the time a municipal organisation, such as a local authority in the UK, can manoeuvre and put in place something. And in this instance, it was 5G above the water. We couldn't move as quickly as the technology was moving, and by the time we put something in, the technology had moved on, and we put in place the Betamax solution when everyone had moved on to VHF, and then moved on from VHF again to actually streaming services. So I think if I was going to say something to Plymouth in terms of copying the concept of smart sound, I would start with mapping your piece map, make it easy to navigate. And I'm just going to come on to sort of my last slide, is make it outward facing, make it so that people look to the ocean. This is an image of Sail GP. Make it international. The reason I'm picking this as an example of a slide is this is Plymouth, where everybody's looking out towards the sea. They're looking out towards this technology being used at its ultimate. The sea looks beautiful. It doesn't always look beautiful and blue in Plymouth in the UK. It often looks grey, as the previous picture, but it does look beautiful. And make sure that you make it as accessible to your business community. Don't put up barriers. And it can be something as simple as this is where you can launch a boat. This is where you can charter a boat. This is where you can get access to the water. This is where you can winch something in and out. And don't try and control it. Just try and facilitate it and make it as easy for the business community as possible. So thank you very much.